Hey there, I'm Jamey from Stonemaier Games, and I'm here today, as usual, on Wednesday at 10 a.m. St. Louis time to hang out with you for an hour. I see Nicole, Austin, Ian, Aaron, Carol already joining us live. Great to see you all. As usual, feel free to ask me anything you want. I'm happy to answer anything today for the next hour. And later today, I'll be live again at 3 o'clock, so in 5 hours, for Rolling Realms. Rolling Realms game 77, I believe. And today we're playing with the Mini Golf Realm, the Isle of Cats Realm, and the Smitten Realm. These are the three realms we'll be live playing today, or I'll be live playing today. That'll be on YouTube, and then I'll put it in the Rolling Realms Facebook group later on. Let's see. Good morning, Miles, Mark, Melissa, Jeff. Good to see you all. I see Ryan says, what am I going to talk about with Arydia? So Arydia is a new open world cooperative campaign game that I received from Cody and Ira, who created the game. And I spent some time with it this past weekend. Not the 40 hours that Ryan says here, but maybe 5 hours. Most of that was set up in the first tutorial. It's a big box of stuff. It's very well organized, and the tutorial is excellent. In fact, there are multiple tutorials. There's a tutorial book, and then when you get to combat, there's a robust tutorial for each character for combat. I was just playing it solo to get a feel for it, and I filmed a video about it and posted that yesterday. You can see how impressed I am by the amount of effort and time and attention to detail that went into Arydia. Really, really impressed by that. Ian says he's impressed by the Finspan packaging. Thanks, Ian. Yeah, we generally go for, if we can, which is in almost all circumstances now, we use paper to wrap cards in our games, either a single strip, or if the cards aren't protected by anything, like a container like they are in Finspan, then we do a full paper wrapping. I think we've pretty much gotten rid of shrink wrap on cards altogether now. Nicole says, Mocktails, is that the new Finspan expansion? Oh, I like that name for Finspan expansion. It is not. So one of the things that I did this past weekend that I had a lot of fun with is that recently I have gotten into making mocktails. I think maybe I said this at the very end of last week's podcast, but it was the very, very end. And by mocktails, I specifically mean drinks, like cocktails that have a non-alcoholic spirit, which until recently I didn't know was even a thing. I didn't know what that was. But there are a bunch of brands, and if you ever Google it, you'll get a ton of Instagram ads and Facebook ads about these brands that make non-alcoholic spirits that taste very similar to the actual equivalent, like a rum, a whiskey, a gin, so on. You've probably seen them. I'm new to them, but just in case you're new to it as well. And so I really like cocktails. I like fruity, juicy, sweet drinks. Not too sweet. I'm trying not to be too heavy on the sugar, but a little sweet. And I like making them. I like experimenting with them. But I don't generally like in most cases, on like a weekday, I don't generally like the impact of alcohol on my body. I don't sleep well afterwards, even after having a single drink. I can't have a cocktail every night of the week, but I can have a small mocktail every night of the week. So long story short, on Sunday night, I decided to share this new love of mocktails with some friends because I have 4 different spirits now. I have equivalents for 4 different main primary alcohol types. And I invited some friends over for dinner and mocktails. And we just had a ton of these spirits and mixers on the table. And we just played around with them. We just made different drinks and had fun with it. We had a blast doing that. So that was one of the highlights. We also played telestrations because the table was so full of stuff, of drinks, and we didn't have any table space. And so telestrations worked as a nice game to pass around these books and draw on them and write and try to guess. Austin says, am I excited about the Fate of the Fellowship game coming from Matt Leacock? Seems like a lot of Lord of the Rings games coming out recently, and a lot of pretty high quality Lord of the Rings games. I love the Fellowship of the Ring, the trick-taking game, that recent one. I love the Duel for Middle-earth, Seven Wonders sequel. Been loving those games. So yeah, I'm at least curious about what he does with Fate of the Fellowship, see if he reaches the high bar that those 2 games have set. Both Brian and who was it that said before? Ian said they like the holes in the plastic bags. When we don't include many plastic bags in our games anymore, unless they're really necessary or helpful. But I think that's something that we've been doing for a long time, to put a little hole in the bag, because that means that you don't have to like precisely squeeze the air out. The air leaves on its own. Hilda says that she likes mocktails too. Hilda, I'm curious, and anyone else watching this who has an interest in mocktails or has explored them a little bit, do you have a favorite non-alcoholic spirit brand, and or within that brand you have a specific non-alcoholic spirit? So far, I would say that my favorite of all of them, and I'm more of a in non-alcoholic world, I'm more of a rum drinker for cocktails than anything else. But I think the gin from Cero, that's Cerocero, their gin, it's like a botanical gin equivalent, has been the best that I've had. It's probably the only one that I would ever drink straight, even though I do mix other things with it, like a gin and tonic, for example. That one I've really enjoyed. And then second place probably so far is the Ritual whiskey equivalent. I really like that one as well. Julio says he has a plumber because he has a hot water slab leak. I'm sorry about that, Julio, especially in this cold weather. Although finally, at least in St. Louis, it's warming up a little bit this week. The ice and snow are finally melting. Julio says, if I remember correctly, something similar happened to you a few years ago. Yeah, about a year ago, I believe it was. I think it was 1 year ago. We had a pipe burst on a very cold day. I think it was Christmas Eve. Not the best day to have a pipe burst because, understandably so, plumbers don't want to work on Christmas Eve if they can be with their families instead, I think. And yeah, we did have that happen, and it was not fun. But the nice thing, I guess the silver lining to anything like that, Julio, in my opinion, is that if something like that breaks that shouldn't break, hopefully when it's fixed in a way that makes it much less likely to break in the future. Like having my appendix out. I can't have another appendectomy because I don't have an appendix anymore. Nice silver lining there. The Infinite Dude says that they received Finspan yesterday and played it with their roommate, who is not a deep gamer, and we both had a blast. Well, thank you. That's awesome to hear. First Wingspan game I've played, and it was smooth and lovely. That's awesome on every level, that you shared the game, that you both had a lot of fun, and that it was your first World of Wingspan experience. I'm glad to hear that. So I can post a quick shipping update. Those of you wondering what is going on with shipping with Finspan, let's talk about that real quick. So in the US, shipping is now fully underway. It was partially underway last week, but we were waiting for the upgrade packs to arrive, and they arrived yesterday in the US. And so we're looking at a pace of around 1,000 orders shipped a day from our fulfillment center here in St. Louis. That's Miniature Market. The one thing that hasn't arrived are the $2 and $50 coins in the US. So if your order has that, there might be a little bit more of a wait, but we're still looking at the original estimate was shipping by like early February, probably through mid-February. We're still definitely on track for that. Canada has less than 200 unshipped orders now. So that means Canada has shipped most of their orders. There are only 200 remaining at this point. And then last, we have Australia. They're doing great at Let's Play Games in Australia. They've shipped about 600 orders. So I think there were a total of around 900 orders in Australia, set on pace to finish off the rest of the orders by the end of the week. The one caveat is Europe. I've said this several times, but I will say it again. Freight shipping from China to Europe has gotten more difficult over the last year or so because of the attacks in the Red Sea, making shipping companies very wary to take shipping containers through the Red Sea and instead going all the way around Africa, which adds around 3 weeks. And then they end up getting congested at port in Europe, which takes extra time. So originally, the European freight shipment for Finspan was going to arrive today, actually, January 29th. And then it got bumped to February 3rd. And I just heard today, unfortunately, it was bumped to February 10th. The report I have is that it was pushed back due to port congestion. So the good news is I think that boat has almost arrived in the UK. It just won't be able to be processed at port until February 10th. And even that is an optimistic estimate at this point. So I appreciate the patience of everyone in Europe. In fact, I will say, I think I've been really impressed by the patience of everyone in Europe over the last year or so. I've seen it for us. I've heard it from other companies that Europeans have been great about being patient about shipments because of the whole situation with the Red Sea. So thank you so much. I know you're eager to get Finspan in Europe, and our fulfillment center is ready to go whenever that shipment arrives. Yeah. The Infinite Dude also has a nice thing to say about the from to box plane setup in Finspan Expedition are wildly smooth. Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, because I really try to make our games easy to get to the table. from when you first open the game, the experience of opening the game and unpacking it, and also just setting up a game to get to the table. There are certainly games that I love that have such a laborious setup that I'm just, not Stonemaier Games, but these other games that are so laborious to set up that I'm less likely to get to them to the table, even though I love it when it's actually finally out on the table. So I try to avoid that with Stonemaier Games. Let's see. Tony says he watched it played for Nova Era. We have what I would consider a decent sized table for our 4-player group. And watching the video, it concerns me that we won't have enough room to play it. After seeing the vertical boards for Finspan, it makes me wonder how much thought does table real estate factor into game design? And is there a double table size developers would use as a frame of reference? Or I'm sorry, a standard table size? Great question there, Tony. I'll peek over your little comment here. It is something that I think many designers factor in, many designers and publishers and graphic designers factor into the game creation process. I talked about this a little bit when I visited Japan. All of the games on the best-selling shelf in Japan required very little table space and very little shelf space as well. So it's both the box size and the table size needed is definitely taken into consideration. For Finspan, I found, I'll take away your comment here for a second. For Finspan, I found that the player mats are big. They're only a little bit bigger than Wingspan, but because they're vertical, they take up a different type of space at the table. However, you can stagger them. Like my player mat can be really close to your table mat. If you're playing on like a longer table, like a picnic table, like a portable picnic table, they stagger really well side to side across the table. And so it is something that we considered. It is something that we think works well with Finspan, even though it does take up more table space than other games. And also with Finspan, one thing that we really kept in mind with that was how much other stuff do we need on the table in the central area? And in Finspan, it's only 2 things. It's a small goal board, or the achievement board, and it is the tray that has the cards that you're drawing from and the tokens that are in the middle of that tray. So very little central space needed for Finspan. Mark says, I've noticed whenever I buy launch products, the first thing in the morning, the game ships faster than when I buy them after work on launch day. Does time of day on an order affect when the game will ship? Good question, Mark. It has absolutely no bearing on when your order ships. So the only thing that impacts the order in which your order will ship from Stonemaier Games is whether or not you are a champion. Champion orders are prioritized over non-champion orders. Everything else is about how our fulfillment centers process all the orders. In fact, they process everything that comes in, and then they stagger them into, or they organize them into optimized batches. How they do that, I don't exactly know. I think it might change based on the shipment. Like they might focus on a bunch of orders that are identical or a bunch of orders to one place. Anything that they can, oftentimes they're focusing on what they can get out the door the fastest. But that isn't always true. Like it doesn't mean that they're just looking at the simplest orders, but they are looking for repetition. So it would really slow down the line. So say, Mark, your order is first, you place the very first order on launch day, and your order just has Finspan in it. But following your order are a bunch of orders that have Finspan and Between Two Castles and the Finspan upgrade pack. As long as we have those things already at the fulfillment center, the fulfillment center might identify that they have 600 identical orders, and they might focus on getting those out the door first, even though your order is a little bit simpler. So I've said it in many newsletters, but I'll repeat it here. The order in which you place your order on launch day has absolutely no bearing on the order in which it will ship. Mr. Burt5 says, do you watch many top 100s? Finspan made one of the Dice Towers top 100. Well, that was fast. It just came out. I don't watch many top 100s. I do, which is odd because I love hundreds of games, but and I like hearing what people love about games. But I generally just wait till they get to the top 10, which is not fair to so many great games between 11 and 100, but I generally don't watch them. So thank you for sharing that. I'll answer a few more questions and I'll throw out some topics for you today. Let's see, what topic haven't I covered? I've kind of covered the topics in the subject line: Mocktails, Finspan, and Arydia. So I have some other new topics that I'll introduce in a moment. But let's do a couple more questions first. Mark says he just got Viticulture Essential Edition and Tuscany Essential Edition. Is there any way to fit them both in the base game box? It's like it was designed to put both in the same box, but removing the base game board. Well, don't remove the base game board. I think the base game board is really important for introducing new players to Viticulture. It's definitely simpler than the Tuscany board. In my copy, honestly, I found that both of them fit. There's a little bit of lid lift, but I think I think viticulture and Tuscany Essential fit into the viticulture box pretty well. So just with a little bit of lid lift. So yeah, that's been my experience, at least, Mark. You can give that a try and see what you think. Darius says, how many applications did you get for the light game you're looking for? Will there be similar requests in the future? So Darius is referring to, and thank you for bringing this up. Recently, I was talking to my co-founder, Alan, my friend Alan, and we were talking about, or I brought up a desire for us to publish exactly one game. So we're not looking for a whole line of games. This isn't reshaping the Stonemaier brand. We're looking for one game that is in the vein of a game like So Clover, Just One, Blob Party, Caution Signs. Those are all kind of, and it doesn't have to be exactly like that. There are some other games like The Mind, but generally games that are where the rules can be explained in just a few easy steps on the back of the box. You can play it with anybody and anyone can have fun with it. You can play it for 10 minutes or you can play game after game for an hour. And they're highly replayable. They're easy to teach. They're short. They're light. I would love to have one game like that because I love games like that because I think they're great for inviting people into gaming. They're great for the beginning or the end of game night. They're great if you have a big group of people before you want to divide into smaller groups at a game night. They're so versatile. They're versatile. And so I'd love to have a game like that in our lineup. But it really has to be special. If we're only going to do one, it has to be the one. It has to be really, really, really special. And so, Daria, to answer your question, we've gotten about 200. So I put out, for context, I put out word to everyone who's ever submitted a game to us on our submission form. I emailed everyone on that form and I said, hey, here's what we're looking for. If you want to submit this, I've added this as an option on our submission form. Feel free to submit this type of game to us if you have one. And so far, we've gotten about around 200 submissions. We've reviewed around 175 of the pitches so far. And so far, I will say there were 5 that intrigued me, but I ended up deciding that they didn't meet. They intrigued me. They were games that I would play, but they weren't at the level that I thought they were truly special in the way that I'm looking for this game. And then we have one that I think we might try out because the catch with these types of games is I can discern partially from reading a pitch how interesting the concept sounds, which is important. It's got to hook me in, just like me pitching a game to you has to hook you in at least to learn more. But it's hard to also tell how much fun this type of game is until you actually try it beyond that initial hook. And so there's one game that has both hooked me and that even though I'm not super confident about it, I think I need to try it to see to see how fun it is. So so far out of the 200, there's one that we're going to reach out to and try, but we're still looking. It's an ongoing process. Anyone here is welcome to look into our submission form. Don't email me. Look at our submission form. That's the way to do it. And let me know if you have a game like that. Not a game idea either. A game that you have fully play tested and designed. Yeah. Mark says, is Between Two Castles Essential Edition the last one, Essential Edition, or are there plans to have an Essential Edition of another Stonemaier game? Definitely no plans, Mark. But I could say that, like, I don't know, 18 months ago, there wasn't a plan for Between Two Castles Essential either. Sometimes we just decide that it's the right thing to do for a game. But that said, looking at our lineup of games, I think it's highly unlikely. Like, we've done this for Viticulture, Between Two Cities, and Between Two Castles. These are all games that were released in 2019 or earlier. Yeah, I think it's unlikely. I think it's unlikely that it would happen again. And definitely, I have no thought about doing that for our biggest brands like Scythe, Viticulture, Wingspan. Definitely no plans or even what's beyond a plan to do that. Oh, Luke says he got the new Wormspan enamel pins, which I think we've sold out of in some regions since then, but we are going to make more of the Wormspan enamel pins. Tony says, should U.S. champions have received a shipping notification email at this point? No, Tony, I said, maybe I'm catching up on comment questions here, but I mentioned the shipping update a few minutes ago. Champion orders are shipping this week from the U.S. around 1,000 orders a day. And I think there are around 5,000 champion orders. So that will take through next week. You should have a shipping notification as a Stonemaier champion in the U.S. by the middle of next week. Okay, let me throw out a few topics here. Jeff has a comment about FedEx. So Jeff doesn't like FedEx. Probably close to 50% of the time they don't deliver based on their delivery time frame. Jeff, just to clarify, we don't, I know it's partially us, but it's Miniature Market chooses the fulfillment partner that they think works best and has the best rates. They are the company that we work with for fulfillment. I hear that feedback. We've had actually very good success with FedEx compared to USPS a little bit, but you always have the option when you order from us, Jeff, to choose your shipping option, and USPS should have been one of those options. If I'm wrong about that, let me know. Go ahead and try to make an order right now just to see if it pops up as an option. But just keep that in mind in the future. If you really don't like that default, there are other options, at least one other option at checkout for you to choose from on our web store. Yeah, so we do try to give you some agency there in making that decision that's best for your location. Okay, well, let's see. I'll do 3 more questions. No, I see 4 here on my screen. I'll do these 4, and then I'll introduce my topics. Foldy says, I see development and design is done for the second expansion for Expeditions. I know that you usually are not sharing anything about upcoming games, but maybe you could share one little nugget. You're right that I don't spoil stuff that we haven't announced yet. So I appreciate your curiosity, but you're right that I'm not going to talk about that yet. Jacob says, have you gotten any promising submissions in response to your call? Oh, yeah, just talked about that a second ago. Jacob, probably catching up on comments. I would say there were 5 that intrigued me, 1 that we're probably going to play, but still looking for maybe the special one. Yeah. Darren says, no plastic eggs for Finspan. Will Wingspan and Wormspan not have plastic eggs from now on? 2 kind of parts to that question, Darren. Wingspan and Wormspan has never had plastic eggs. Wingspan hasn't had plastic eggs in 2 years now. The eggs have been wooden. And Finspan actually does have plastic eggs in the upgrade pack. In the core game, they're cardboard, but in the upgrade pack, they are a spongy, gummy type of plastic in Finspan, which I know kind of goes against our no plastic policy or reducing plastic policy, but we're always trying to balance that with the consumer experience. And here we thought the best experience for that upgrade pack was to go with these honey buzz-like eggs in Finspan. And here's Pam Walls. Pam knows that I love her game Blob Party. So I would be, Pam says, is there a deadline to submit a light game or just ASAP? It's a rolling thing, Pam. There's no deadline. Whenever we find the game that's at the level of Blob Party, it's got to be the level of Blob Party, which I know is tough to repeat that level of success. But Pam is the designer for Blob Party, for those of you who don't know. Yeah, just it's a rolling thing until we find the right game. Okay, let me throw out some stuff at you today. Oh, here we go. Oh, okay. So Joe clarifies something I said. Sorry about that. Joe says customers can't currently choose the shipping option. They can choose an upgrade option, and that is ground shipping with either FedEx or UPS, depending on cost. I see. Thank you, Joe, for clarifying that. So I was wrong about that. You cannot specify the company, but you can specify the method of shipping with the company chosen by our fulfillment center. Thank you, Joe, for clarifying that. Okay, let me throw out some topics to you today. So the big question I have for you today, something that I might do a blog post about in the near future, is what is the biggest change you would like to see in the board game industry? So something coming from publishers, designers, artists, whatever that might be, people who are creating games. And what is the biggest change you would like to see from the board game community, your fellow gamers? Is there a problem that, or something that you would just like to change? Let's not call it a problem. Let's call it a positive change. Is there a positive change you would like to see from either the board game industry and or the board game community? That's my big question of the day today. Something I've been thinking about recently. I'll throw out a few other things, some fun things from this past weekend. I went to local bakery Whisk. If you're ever in St. Louis, I highly recommend going to Whisk. It's a fantastic bakery. However, they do pop-ups now. They aren't consistently open. And so they have a pop-up for a holiday, or pop-up for, in this case, to celebrate the 90s. And so they had a bunch of 90s themed treats, and it was an absolute delight. I think my favorite thing I got from there, although there were a lot of good treats, but my favorite thing thematically combined with how tasty it was they served the rich chocolate cake from the movie Matilda. 90s callback there for Matilda, the Roald Dahl book and the movie. So that was a delight this past weekend. I played disc golf this past weekend and had my longest throw in ever. It wasn't a hole in one. It was a 581 foot basket, which was a par 4 at this course. This is called Lakeside in St. Louis. And I threw around maybe a 300 foot drive, and then had another, around 200. I estimated at 275, but I guess if it was 300, it would be 281 feet. I just chucked the disc of the basket, hoping it would get anywhere close, and it actually went in the basket from there. So it was an eagle, my second ever eagle, and that wasn't a hole-in-one, but it was surreal and unbelievable. And it's longer than any of my hole-in-ones. I have 5 hole-in-ones, and all of them are shorter than that. So that was my longest ever throw-in. Felt really good. Been replaying that in my head a lot. I also got to play Arydia. I mentioned that earlier in the livecast. If you want to scroll back to earlier, I talked about the game Arydia a little bit. Also got to play the Woodland Edge expansion for Forest Shuffle. I had it on order from Fortuna Games, a local game store here, and picked it up. They called me and told me they had a copy, and I picked it up and played it right away. Hope to play it maybe again at game night tonight. Delightful little expansion from Forest Shuffle. And also the movies I watched recently were 1917, which blew my mind. You all recommended it. I appreciate the recommendation because it was incredible to have this one long shot. The entire movie is one long shot. And I also watched the movie Blink Twice, which is a scarier movie. And it helped that I watched the movie essentially with sound off. I turned the sound off and turned the subtitles on. And that really helped me watch because it was actually a really good movie, this movie Blink Twice, but it was very intense, difficult to watch at times. But having the sound off and removing like the drama of big scary beats with the sound helped me enjoy the movie a lot more. So that was Blink Twice. I have a few other things to talk about, but let me go back to comments and questions in a minute. Oh, awesome. Jeff says that he's using Blob Party this afternoon for a student icebreaker. That's awesome. I think it works really well as an icebreaker. Sam says, I don't know if you're looking for blog ideas. I'm always looking for blog ideas, but I'd love to see one where you distill each Stonemaier release to a lesson you learned from that process. That's a good one, Sam. That's a good one. That's a really good one. I kind of need to maybe do a post-mortem on Finspan to see if there's something like that from Finspan. I do have some related content. It isn't exactly what you're asking for, but I do have blog posts. If you go to our website and go to, let's see where I can find it. If you go to the Stonemaier Games website on your computer, I don't know if it shows up on mobile, and go to Insights from Our Projects and go to the blog header, and then go to Insights from Our Projects. You can see blog posts about pretty much all of all the projects that we've launched, all the games essentially. But I know it's nice to have that stuff distilled into a single article instead of having to read 20 articles. So I will think about that. And then the other side of it is I do have a video. I think you can look up the word regrets or maybe mistakes, but I think it's regrets. I have a video on our YouTube channel about regrets. One regret that I have from each of our games. One thing that I think we could have done a little bit better that's more focused on game design than the launch process itself. So which one are you more interested in? The game design side, or the product game design / product design, or the actual launch, like the business side and marketing side of launching a new product? Chaz says, have you watched Skeleton Crew that the season is now over? I found it really fun. I did watch Skeleton Crew. Yeah, I kind of caught up and then watched the finale right after it happened. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Thought it was a great show. I had no idea that it was going to feel a little bit like Goonies in space. But once I realized that's what it was, I was like, oh yeah, I'm here for this. This is incredible. Julio says, so my question about changes to the community, he says, negativity does not move us in the right direction. Constructive criticism helps, but insults don't. I really like that. And that's on my mind for this list for the community is toxicity, and how it kind of just brings everyone down. I understand that not everyone is going to like everything, and that nothing is perfect. But I think constructive criticism is a much healthier way to do that than toxicity. Eric says, what I would like to see is that if you want to give your opinion as a player, do it politely, especially if you don't like the game. I'm all for freedom of speech, but keep it civilized. Similar to what Julio says, and I really agree with you there, Eric. I really resonate that. One thing I heard, I think Rodney from Watch It Played said it really eloquently a few years ago, is that if you post on social media that you're excited about a game, maybe you just bought it, maybe you backed it, maybe you received it, and in the comments, someone chimes in to say, oh, I didn't like that, or that game sucks, whatever they want to say about that game in a negative way, it's totally fine for you to think that, but that isn't constructive. And you're really bringing down someone who is excited about a game that they just received. Like it's really low, I think, to do that. And so I think some people say, don't yuck on someone else's yum, I think is the expression. And that I would love to see that stop. I haven't seen that as much now as I see whenever like we announce a new game and people have thoughts about it before they've even played it. But yeah. Austin says, for publishers, eliminate exclusives or limited releases. It's often challenging to gauge if you'll enjoy a game, and missing out on content or special components can be a bummer. Yeah, Austin, I agree. I'm surprised this practice is still happening. I am fully against exclusives. It doesn't seem inclusive. Ray says, board game industry change. Better insults, not insults, inserts overall would be nice. Dune Imperium is his favorite game, but boy, do I wish it had a proper insert. It seems some publishers are really on board with this and others aren't. So only some people would need a change. For board game community, and I will say, just to give a shout out to a nice insert I used recently that was also eco-friendly, because it doesn't always have to be a nice plastic insert, was Wondrous Creatures. Had a really nice cardboard insert that held everything in place just exactly as it needed to be. I think also Kavango from last year had a really nice, even a removable tray style cardboard insert. You will also see what I think is a really nice cardboard insert in Vantage later this year. Ray says, for the boarding community, it would be nice to see a slowdown in the backing of all kinds of unnecessary stuff on crowdfunding platforms. That's interesting, Ray. So you want to see people back less stuff. I'm curious how that impacts you, I guess would be my question for that. Luke says, for community, I don't care for calling games toys. Games are a medium. Some are toy adjacent, but some tackle serious topics like books, movies, etc. I can see what you're saying there, Luke. In a way, I do see games in the broader category of toys, but I can see how that term can also be used as a pejorative, kind of dismissing games as, oh, it's just a toy. Games are so much more than that. Games have been huge, I think, for me personally, as a social, for the social aspect of engaging with other people. As an introvert, I would like to have that platform to engage with other people, and just the keeping my brain active. Like it is, games are I feel like they're really, really good for our brains. Learning new games, retaining new games, coming up with clever solutions in games, escaping into games, and playing out scenarios and incredibly low stakes scenarios that we think of, things that we can't do in real life, but we can experiment with in games. Yeah, I think, I totally see what you're saying. Steven says, what is your philosophy on the use of Tabletopia versus Board Game Arena? Playing my copy of Finspan tomorrow at game night. I think they both complement each other. Our method at Stonemaier Games is that we put our games on Tabletopia right at the release, primarily because I think many people use Tabletopia to experiment with our games, but not necessarily, not really to replace the tabletop experience, even though it does look like the game actually looks like on the tabletop. It requires you to know how to play the game, basically. Whereas with Board Game Arena, I really like Board Game Arena. I play Board Game Arena. I have a every other week Board Game Arena game night. I like that I can play games on there. But we don't release our games on Board Game Arena until around 2 years after the tabletop release, because I think people do use Board Game Arena as a replacement for the tabletop experience, which I think is a little unfortunate for a lot of games. I think maybe they're, yeah, it's hard for me to say, because I think there are some great experiences to be had on Board Game Arena, but I don't want it to generally be my first experience with the game, or what I view as the only experience with the game. And I've done this myself. There are many games that I've been curious to play, and I find out it's on Board Game Arena, and instead of exploring playing them at a convention with people on the table and seeing if I really like the tabletop experience, I'll play them on Board Game Arena instead, and that will entirely replace the tabletop experience. So that's why our method is to wait 2 or 3 years for a Board Game Arena release. Thank you, Maddie. This is the expression, don't yuck people's yum. Yeah, I totally agree. Totally agree. Chad says, biggest change I would like to see is to move away from campaign-only games. I liked the ARC's approach to make a base game that can be replayed along with a replayable campaign expansion. And I would add to that, Chad, that if a game is going to be a campaign game, and I like the ARC's method of giving you the choice there, although I think you need to maybe buy something separate for ARCs. There's like a core game, and then you buy the expansion pack, something like that. But if you are going to have a campaign, make it short. Make it short and replayable, or even not replayable. Just make it short. I would play through so many more campaigns if they were 3, 5, maybe 8 games instead of 12, 15, 20, 25 games. I don't think longer is better with campaign games anymore, in my opinion. Patrick says, any potential news on expansions for Wormspan? I would love to see new mechanisms, potentially Elder Dragons or something similar. So Patrick, I will say, I'm not going to talk about what's in the expansion, but I will say that we are now finalizing the files to send to the printer for the Wormspan expansion. It's something I've been working on this week, actually, with our graphic designer and with proofreaders and with Connie, the designer. So we are really close to sending them to the printer. We should have them to the printer, Panda, our manufacturer, by the end of the Chinese New Year, which is in about a week. I've also been working on recently our version of Tokaido Duo, which, similar to our version of Tokaido, will just be Tokaido Duo, but with friendlier components, friendlier rules, especially in terms of font size for players. And by friendly rules, I don't mean like different mechanisms. I mean easier to read rulebook and easier to understand rulebook. And I'm also starting to work on the Tokaido expansions. There are 2 expansions for Tokaido, along with a few promos. And we're just going to probably, if the quote comes out right, we're probably just going to put them all in one box if we can get the right price for it. Ian says he likes the sandwich system for feedback, which I like this too, Ian. Positive, negative / constructive, and then positive. It works really well for games too. It does. And what I really like about it, Ian, what I think works really well about this is that I think some people can hear that method and think, oh, I don't necessarily have something positive to say about it, or why should I have to balance out positive with negative? But the key, I think, is helping someone. If you're going to give feedback, a big part of that is that you want the person to hear the feedback. And one of the best ways to get someone to hear feedback, in my opinion, is to use the sandwich method. Open them up to feedback by saying something that you enjoy about it. Find something that you enjoy about it, that you genuinely do think is positive, and then pair it with something constructive, especially if they ask for constructive criticism. If they didn't ask, that might be a different case. But I think they're much more likely to hear it that way. Okay, Sam says he's more interested to hear my reflection on how you felt the experience was only getting to attach one lesson to each product. So this is Sam's question about one takeaway from each product we have. How you felt the experience was only getting to attach one lesson to each product. Sam, I still might need a little bit of clarity here. Are you looking for my retrospective on the product design itself? So let's use Finspan as an example. Are you looking for me to look at Finspan, the product, and reflect on one lesson that I learned from making this product? Or are you looking for one lesson related to what I learned from launching this product? Yeah, that's the distinction I need from you, Sam. Austin says, echoing toxicity for the community feedback, particularly in crowdfunding platforms, there seems to be a higher level of entitlement for things that are sometimes outside of the designer's control. I've seen that a lot too, Austin. I don't miss that side of crowdfunding. I'll come back to a few other questions in a minute, or comments in a minute. These are great feedback about this question. I'll throw out some other things at you real quick. I went to a birthday party on Saturday. My friend Mel, happy birthday to Mel. And the fun twist about this party is that her husband made a bunch of pastas, different types of pastas that he wanted to experiment with. So we basically had a pasta birthday party on Saturday night, which is a lot of fun. I've had a lot of time for a new game. In addition to the Wormspan Tokaido stuff, I've been working on a new game design that may end up being a game, may not. We'll find out. And recent content that I posted was about high interaction games, was one of the things that I posted recently. That was my video from this past week. I've also been I just started watching the new Squid Games. I'm watching Traders season 3 in the US. And I didn't watch the whole series, but I've watched the last 2 episodes of Beast Games, a competition show from Mr. Beast. It's been interesting to watch. Especially these three shows, Squid Games, Traders, and Beast Games, all near each other. They all have some overlapping elements in terms of betrayals and competitions against each other. If you are curious about launch time or shipping times for Finspan, I talked about that earlier in the live cast, probably around the 20-minute mark. And the other question I have for you today, I had 2 questions. One was what is the biggest change that you'd like to see in the board game industry or community? And the other question I had for you is, what is your favorite game that breaks the rules of gaming? I use rules very loosely. And an example of this, I think this will make more sense with an example, is the game Hanabi. Hanabi asked the question, do the cards in your hand need to be facing you, or could they be facing the other way? Because I think, for every other game before Hanabi that I know of, the cards in your hand were facing you if you have cards in hand. And Hanabi said, wait a minute, nope, we're gonna ignore that rule, that common practice, and flip it around. Your cards are facing away from you. Can you think of any other games that do something like that? A game that you really love or appreciate that you think took a common practice, a well understood rule of game design, and flipped it around to something new? Let me know about that in the comments here. Darren says, I didn't like it doesn't help anyone, but I didn't like it or it wasn't for me because I like that last phrasing better. Well, actually, no, both of those are fine. I think I didn't like it or it wasn't for me and adding a reason there is much better than saying this is bad. I once had a designer just say that to me after a playtest. He said, this is bad. I was like, how do you, as a game designer, how do you use that phrasing? Like, you can do better than that. Come on. Say that I didn't like it, or this didn't work in our session because, and explain what do you mean by it didn't work either. I'm actually constantly asking our playtesters to do this too, to not just say this didn't work or this is imbalanced. Tell me why it's unbalanced. Tell me why it felt imbalanced, or what type of impact it had on the game itself. The why is so important. Chad says, I really don't like the whole AI movement. I'm with you, Chad, but I'm curious if a website could use an AI filter to filter out a negative verbiage in comments. It could. I think that's a pretty dangerous slippery slope there, because it probably would remove constructive criticism as well by accident. Maddie says the best insert they've seen recently is Art Society. Oh, Maddie, I totally agree. I played this at Geekway Mini. It was great to see you at Geekway Mini recently. And the insert is so functional in Art Society. It organizes all the tiles. You kind of pass the whole insert, the whole box around the table as people take turns being the auctioneer. And it has a special coating that we used back in the way back in the day on our treasure chest. It's a kind of a felt coating on the insert that makes it feel luxurious. Yeah, really, really great insert. Carol says her criticism of community, people whining about not being the first one to get their shipment and not being willing to understand that completely accurate timelines are impossible. Oh, I hear that, Carol. Yeah, I especially hear that during launch times. I think, and the thing that I try to say, here's a way that I can hopefully say it, is that, and I'll use Carol as an example. Carol gets it, but Carol, I'm going to use it as an example. If I asked Carol to ship, let's say even just 5,000, to ship 5,000 things, do you think Carol would be able to do that today? Absolutely not. Like, it's just like, imagine me giving you that task to ship 5,000 things. Imagine how long that would take you. And yes, fulfillment centers are set up to ship things optimally, but they're still ultimately individual people like you and me who are putting things in boxes and labeling them with the right label and getting them onto a container. And so try to think about the amount of work that goes into shipping those things. It's one of the reasons, I'll say it, I still buy stuff from Amazon. But it's one of the reasons that now when I do that, I choose the option of like my shipping day. I think a Thursday is my or whatever my shipping day is. Probably should broadcast your shipping day, given how people steal stuff off front doors and whatnot. But yeah, I choose my shipping day because I know that there is a human being on the other end of this putting stuff in a box. And if I can, instead of having them put 5 different things in 5 different boxes and ship them to me on 5 different days, if I can have them do that instead on one day into one box, it's better for that person, I hope, and I think it's better for the environment. Yeah, a little bit of a tangent there, but a little bit of the point is, try to think about the human on the other end trying to accomplish this task for you. As much as you want to get that game to the table, there's a human on the other end of it. Peter says, is it a possibility that future expeditions expansions are going to render the original insert useless? I really like everything to fit in one box. It is no. I mean, no. We've designed around that insert in expeditions. Aaron wants to say, oh, here's Aaron's full comment. Better inserts is something I'd like to see, and a guide for how to best utilize the insert. Yeah, that's actually, it's a little harder to do than you would think, but it is really nice when a game does that well. He says Metal Gear Solid has a very good insert, but there are 6 cubbies that I have no idea what went in them. Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. Just to give you all a quick idea of what this process is like. The insert is usually one of the last things designed in a game because you need to have the final versions of all components to know how they actually fit into the insert. And so at that point, sometimes it's too late to include on like the ideal place, the side of the box, how things go back in that box. So it's something that we try to do, but we should maybe do it at least for reprints, because at reprints, at that point, we know for sure how things go back in the box. Yeah. Seven Castles Game says, do you think the sheer volume of and information available combined with the vast amount of knowledge needed from the start to finish can sometimes discourage people from publishing a game? Interesting question. I think it can be daunting. Like if someone goes to the Stonemaier Games website to learn about crowdfunding or game design, I get so many people asking me for like the number one tip. And the number one tip is to not limit it to one tip. Like there's a lot of work that goes into it. And I think in some ways, honestly, I think that's good. I think it does discourage some people from publishing a game. I think that might be a good thing in certain cases. If you are not ready or willing or prepared for the risk and time and effort and love that is necessary to publish a game, to self-publish a game in particular, it's better to see a daunting list of articles and realize, oh, wow, I'm not ready for this, than it is to get midway through that process and realize, oh, wow, I am way over my head and this is not for me. So I think it maybe is discouraging in mostly a good way. And yeah, I think that's my answer. What You Can Collect says, I see several illustrators for Stonemaier Games selling prints or other products on their own. How does copyright work in those cases? Do you have a royalty arrangement in such cases? Great question. Yeah. So our agreement with artists is generally that when we have paid them to create art, that we own that art. We can use that art as we want. That has evolved a little bit over the years because I've realized that I really appreciate the amount of time that artists put into their work, and I don't want to limit their use of that art for other uses. And so we kind of have this middle ground in the contract where we're like, okay, the art, we're paying for the art, so the art is ours. But if you want to use the art in a way that has nothing to do with anything that we're ever going to make, like if you want to sell art prints of the game or the original illustrations for the game, that you made for the game, please do so. You don't owe us anything for those. We want you to thrive in that way. I think the reason it's in the contract in that way is because I don't want to pay Clementine, for example. I don't want to pay Clementine to make a dragon illustration specifically for Wormspan. And then I see that dragon illustration show up in not necessarily another game, but a completely another format, say a puzzle. And maybe we wanted to make a puzzle for that art and we paid for it. So yeah, the general idea is that our artists have, if they come to me and say, hey, Jamey, and this happened with Wingspan. They were like, I had people come to me, or the artists have come to me and they said, hey, we have someone who wants to publish a calendar of Wingspan art. And we're not going to make a calendar of Stonemaier Games. We're not a calendar company. And so I was like, yeah, of course. Thank you for asking. And yes, you can go ahead and make sure that you get compensated fairly from the company that makes the calendar. Go ahead, please do that. It's not going to overlap or compete with anything that we are making. Hopefully that answers your question. Yeah. Tony says, for the industry, I'd like to see less expansion plans built into the initial release of a game. Oh, I really like that one, Tony. I was thinking about that the other day too. Just like actually, I wouldn't even say expansion plans. I would say, for me, it would be like games that launch on crowdfunding with multiple expansions already there. Like I want those expansions to evolve later. Yeah. Tony says, just like the movie industry does, some game releases seem like they have a plan for expansion as a design point rather than making a great game initially. From the community, I agree with others about people having to comment negatively on things that people say they're just excited to play. It's not exclusive to the gaming community, though. That's true. So, Tony, I do see what you're saying about the expansion plans, but I would add a little caveat that there's a balance there. Because I think, and I'll use Expeditions as an example here. When we released Expeditions, I hadn't already designed new expansion factions, but I thought it was pretty likely that I would. And so it's not like I cut something from the core game that I could have included. It was that I saw the potential for it, and I know that gamers generally like to have room in the core box so they don't have to have two different boxes on their shelf. So that is a delicate balance between the two of them. to plan for the potential future without just cutting stuff from the core game. And so I would, yeah, I don't even want to say give designers or publishers the benefit of the doubt there, but maybe ask questions. If you do see a publisher do that, ask them, hey, have you already designed this and you're just holding it back? Or are you just planning for the possibility of a future where we have this stuff? Okay, Ray's clarifying here. He says, whenever I feel like dipping my toe into crowdfunding endeavors, there is a full ocean of things being crowdfunded at any given time to wade through to find something good. I think it can be reasonably determined that a large number of these games won't end up being something truly special. I only am really able to buy 1 or 2 new games a year, so I would end up seriously bummed only to get something that ends up disappointing. It seems like, and I think his comment's going to finish later. So this is, I think, less about the backers and more about creators being more discerning about what they actually bring to market, which is, I think that's true. Wendy says exactly what Julio said. Sarcastic, condescending replies don't encourage people to share possible differences in rule interpretations, etc. We're here for community, not cruelty. And absolutely, Wendy, I completely agree. And this is something that we moderate in our Facebook groups for our games. Yeah, I think, and the moderation goes both ways. If you answer a rule question in a sarcastic, belittling, condescending way, we will trim that. If you ask a rule question in a condescending, belittling way, sometimes we'll remove that too, because you can ask a question without insulting the rule book or insulting others who have asked a similar question. You can definitely do that. So both in asking and answering questions, just be kind. Be kind in the way that you ask it. Let's see. Chris says he'd love to see more cats in games. I like that, Chris. Greg says his local community used Board Game Arena and Discord to replace in-person meetups during the pandemic. Yeah, that we did too. We did too. This led us to pick up actual copies of Q-Birds and Chakra, 2 of our favorite small games. And Greg, I do agree that this happens. I think Board Game Arena does lead to some purchases of the actual tabletop games, but I think it also does replace a lot of them as well. Mark says, when can we expect more info on Vantage? I'm so curiously excited. My pattern so far has been to release an update on the 20th of the month. And so I'm actually going to start working on, I spend almost the entire month working on it. So in a day or so, I'm going to start working on the new update for Vantage for February 20th. The Sea Otter says, will Finspan be in the Plan Win at Geekway this year? It will be. Yeah, it will indeed be there. Yeah. Geekway in May in St. Louis. Yeah. Oh, and Maddie responds to this as well. Yeah. So I had I physically brought 2 copies of Finspan with me to give to Geekway Mini recently, and we'll definitely have it for Geekway Prime as well. If they'll have it, Maddie says we try not to duplicate games, but I appreciate, Maddie, you potentially making an exception for that. Let's see. Sean says, I missed it, or was Finspan not on sale during launch? Finspan was on sale during launch. Yeah, our launch period is usually Wednesday to Sunday. During that period, it's on sale, and then all champions get an additional 20% discount. Finspan was on sale, and the upgrade pack was on sale. And then after Sunday, the price goes up either all the way up to MSRP or to a higher price than the sale price. Julio says, kind of how Stonemaier does a base game with upgradable components to make the game cheaper. Some games I won't buy because for that price, I can buy 2 games I also want. This is something that we actually debated quite a bit for Finspan. Do we make Finspan the same price as Wingspan or Wormspan and put these deluxe components in the game from the start? Or do we make them available separately so that we can offer Finspan at a much lower price? And now you all know the final price now. Wingspan is a $65 game. Wormspan is a $65 game. Finspan is a $50 game. It's a pretty significant difference there. And then you can get the upgrade pack if you want for $20. So it was definitely a choice. I can't even say for sure if that was the right choice, but I think with Finspan being the slightly less complex cousin to Wingspan, making it more accessible in terms of price, I think was the right call. So that's something that we do for various games, but that was a key decision for Finspan in particular. Steven says it would be nice if publishers took a break for a full year and let everyone catch up on their shelves of opportunity. I can't be the only one with a backlog of unplayed games. I kind of like that, Steven. It's tough to say like, oh, okay, we'll be the one to step up and do that because we have games in the works for the next couple of years. But I kind of like that anyway. I like the spirit of that. Yeah. The Photon Mom says, have you read or seen the book, The Geometry of Pasta? The book talks about the origin and function of each pasta shape. It usually contains a recipe for a sauce for each pasta shape. I have not read it, but I believe the friend who hosted the pasta birthday, my friend Adam, I think he has read this book. I think he is really fascinated by the way the different pasta, how it changes the taste, how it changes how you pick it up or cut it or not cut it, and how it picks up different amounts of sauce. Yeah. Aaron says, I haven't played it, but Don't Get Got is almost an activity. It gives each player 5 social challenges, like get someone to give you a fist bump that breaks the rule of sitting down for a game. Oh, I really like that, Aaron. That we all sit in the same place throughout the entire game. I really, really like that. Yeah, that's exactly the type of thing I'm talking about. I haven't played Don't Get Got, but let's see. I'm going to type it out here. Don't Get Got move seats. This is my note-taking shorthand. Tony says, I love the repetitive elimination rule in Just One, where the hints you give a player are eliminated if someone else uses them too. That's interesting, Tony. I think that kind of applies to this category in Just One. Yeah, I like that. Chad says, Cat in the Box, the suit choice, how cards don't have suits, and Architects of the West Kingdom starting the game with all the workers. Yeah, worker placement. I have another game from Shem on the list, but I like that one too. Architects start with all workers, and Cat in the Box for no suits. So this question, if you're coming in late here, is games that have something that kind of breaks a common practice or a rule of game design. Eric says, Finspan actually has that. Normally cards in your hand are private, but in Finspan, cards are public information, and you have your own personal discard pile instead of a general one. You know, you're right. I hadn't thought about that for Finspan. I don't know if it completely breaks the rules, but it's all on those same lines. So face up hands and personal discard. The personal discard, I would say, is maybe a little bit on the edge because Magic the Gathering has been around for 30 years, and it has the graveyard, which is your own personal discard pile. But Magic is a little bit different in that the cards that you're playing with are not shared cards between all players, that you're coming to the game with your own deck. So Finspan is unique in that way. Edward also echoes Cat in the Box. I love echoes. I love Cat in the Box. Wendy says, you are not allowed to rearrange your hand of cards once you pick them up and look at them. They can be grouped and played as they are dealt to you. Wendy, I totally agree, but I have to give credit to that, I believe, to Bonanza. Unless there's even another classic card game that comes before then. Bonanza can't rearrange cards in hand. I'll mention Scout here too. Why not mention it? Like it? Yeah, it doesn't have to be the first game to break the rule. It can be a game that breaks the rule. Maddie says, breaking accepted board game rules is my favorite design space. Every one of my games tends to have that feature. Well, Maddie, I know one of your games, Hounds, Hoot and Hounds. I'm sorry, Maddie. Let me know the exact name. Heckin' Hounds is the name of the game. I just had a crazy face there when I said that. But Maddie, let me know another example if you want to share that. I'd love to hear another example. Sam says, Slay the Spire card upgrade system using sleeves to make all the backs. I found very clever. And that kind of goes along with clear cards, which I think started in Gloom. Gloom might be the first game. Clear cards. Lots of different plays on cards. There's even a game with holes in the cards. Oh, I forget the name of the game. It's a game with a circle in the middle of the cards. I don't know. I don't remember the name of that game. Holes in cards. So a lot of different iterations on cards and how players do what players do with cards. Chris says, basically remember that publishers want you to get your game as soon as possible and be satisfied. Yes. And that there's still people, not targets, to vent your frustrations to. You're on the same team. And I think, Chris, I would piggyback on top of this and say that sometimes I think people don't realize, like if you, what might be venting frustration for you might come across very differently to a publisher reading it. Like you might just, in fact, what might come across as enthusiasm to you might come across very differently. And really, it's one of the reasons why in the Facebook groups for our games, we now have a thing that we post right after the launch that says, if you've already gotten your tracking, your shipping notification, or even your shipment, that's awesome. But that is not worth an entire post on its own. You can post in the comments of this thread, but it's not worth a post because a lot of other people probably haven't gotten it. And you're not really adding any value to the conversation just by saying, I got my shipping notification. People might still be curious about that, but that's why we have this thread where you can do it in a single thread instead of as a new post. And likewise, if you haven't gotten it, it also doesn't add to the conversation just to say, to use an entire post to say, I haven't gotten my shipping notification yet, or I'm anxiously waiting, or I'm patiently waiting. That's also not adding to the conversation of that group. So we remove all those posts and we say, post in this shared thread. If you want to vent there, go ahead and do it. But as a singular post, it doesn't really add much to the community, in my opinion. Maddie says, I'm working on an economic simulator making fun of cryptocurrency that breaks most of the conventions of economics games. That's cool. I'm curious to see that one, Maddie. Carol says, the shipping complaints in a normally wonderful community have been so disheartening in the Dice Throne community with the X-Men shipments right now. Your exact example with shipping numbers. Thanks, Carol, for willing to be the subject of my example there and for providing an example with Dice Throne and X-Men. Especially, yeah, that's rough. That's rough for a company. Board Gamer Eric says, the hunger breaks the rule in which purchasing certain cards can give you more points, but ultimately makes your movement slower and ultimately causes you to lose the game. That's interesting. And I'm trying to think of a way to summarize that with the hunger. But for now, I'll just make a note with in general, and I'll find a way to say that later. The hunger. And that's actually kind of similar to Deep Sea Adventure, which I think came first. Yeah, great example there. Luke said Paul Adema did a song about inserts last week. Oh, wow, I'm past 11, but I'm behind on comments. Let's see. David says, do the dive column restrictions in Finspan have thematic connections to the fish? Did you explore making each column a different ocean or region? Not a different ocean. I can see, because it is everything kind of existing in the same habitat. We need youngs to be able to swim from one to the other freely. But it kind of goes into, you can look at the player mat for the theme behind it loosely. The theme is probably pretty loose in the dive sites. But see how there's a lot more life and coral on the left side of the player mat. And then the farther you go to the right, you're moving not necessarily deeper, but into the potential for deeper water in a way. Yeah. Garrett's popping in late here. Thank you, Garrett, for popping in to say hi. Let's see. Jeff says, as someone who grew up playing games like, I always forget how to pronounce this. Pinochle? And euchre. I can pronounce euchre. The crew broke the rules of trick taking for me. Yeah, I totally agree with that. That one is on the list. Also, have you seen the new Survivor board game? Are you interested? I have seen it. I need to maybe dig a little bit more into it to see if it is something that interests me, Jeff. I need to check that out. Are you interested in it? What do you think of it so far? Nate says the board game community can improve by practicing patience and the kindness with crowdfunding fulfillment. So a lot of people echoing this about fulfillment. He says, I see a lot of people asking why their pledge hasn't shipped yet when fulfillment just started. Yes. Yeah, I think, and this is, yeah, I'll mention this again in another way. If you see that someone has posted that they have received their shipment, that they are a different person than you. Their circumstances might be different. Their order might be different. They might be in a different place. They might just be in a different batch. Not everything can ship simultaneously because there is a human behind these things shipping them. They can't ship 5,000 things at the same time. And yeah. Ivan says, here's a mechanism that is very rare in games. It does not always work. Semi-cooperative. We all play against the game, but secretly we gather points for the ultimate win. Castaways and Robin Hood and Merry Men. You're right. That is pretty rare. That does kind of break the rule. In fact, one kind of like this is along those lines too. Made me think is the trader mechanism. We know this somewhat more commonly now, but I think why am I blanking on the name? It's the round table game. Camelot. Shadows over Camelot, I think, was the first game with a trader. Correct me if I'm wrong about that. But like a cooperative game that is actually semi-cooperative or could be semi-cooperative depending on if there's a trader in there. Garrett says, has anyone asked about the Gloomhaven 2nd edition manufacturing news from yesterday? I thought that was unfortunate, but also extremely fascinating, but definitely curious on your take on how it could happen. Garrett, I don't know the context for that. Is there an article or something I could check out with that information? Is that on the Cephalofair website? I'm not familiar with that one. Let's see. Patrick says, yay or nay for Tailspan for cats. I think we're happy with just fish, birds, and dragons, but I love the memes about other span games. Interesting. Peter says, I'd like to see fewer duo versions of games, duo or duel or duet, that already have a strong two-player mode. That's interesting. Yeah, because I would consider many of the duo duel style games to be games that don't have a strong two-player mode, but maybe there are a few exceptions to that. Nate says, also how they speak to the company. Back in the game, and backers were berating not just the company, but also adding personal jabs because they weren't posting enough updates, in their opinion. Yeah, that's rough. I don't fondly remember those days of Kickstarter from that. What you can collect says, how do you handle communication regarding publishing with illustrators? Have you ever had to go back and change a publishing arrangement for art in a game? We've changed it, I think, in favor of the artist. I don't think we've ever made it more restricting. In terms of communication, email, I mean email with our artists all the time. Yeah, I'm not sure if that's exactly what you're referring to, but yeah. Ian says, lunar taking you has no suits until someone picks one, then the fun begins. That's cool. A little bit like Cat in the Box. Okay, I know I'm a little behind here, so I'm going to scroll, see if there's any other questions here. Jordan points out that Tapestry breaks the rules of most polyomino games, letting you build outside your capital city limits. You know, I hadn't thought about that for Tapestry, but you're right. Tapestry, build outside city limits. You're right. Yeah, most games with a grid don't let you do that. Champion Faction mentions that they catch up on their shelf of opportunity simply by not buying new games. So taking the emphasis on himself rather than publishers to publish fewer games. Cheating Moth. Yeah, that's Paul mentions this one. You can cheat any way possible to win. That's true. And isn't, what is the other game that does that too? There's another game that lets you cheat. Cockroach Poker? I think that's the one. Or maybe I'm confusing this too. Does Cockroach Poker let you cheat? I'll mention both. Poker, you can cheat. It's one of those games where you end up looking at the ground underneath the table after you finish playing, and it's full of components from the game. Tony says, I'll give Stonemaier Games some props for a game rule that was unique. Charterstone was the first game I played that literally had a handful of rules and a rulebook itself developed based on choices and events that your players created. That will always have a soft spot for me. Thanks, Tony. Yeah, I appreciate that. I intended Charterstone to have a completely blank rulebook, but that didn't actually work out in playtesting. Julie says, Between Two Cities breaks the rule of working on one board at a time and it being simultaneously cooperative and competitive. I think, let's see if I had this on my list, Julie. Maybe I don't. No, I don't think I do. Okay. Oh, no, here we go. Partnership and a competitive game. Yeah. Yeah, I really like that one. Obviously, I publish it. Chad says, QE has no limit on how much you can bid. Yes, that's a great one. No bid limits. Yeah. Actually, there probably is. That reminds me, in QE, there's also the rule where if you bid the most over the course of the game, you cannot, or if you spent the most over the course of the game, you cannot win. And so I'm wondering, what was the first game that had a condition like that, that said, if you met or didn't meet this threshold, you are not eligible for the win? I have a video about this, but I'm not sure what the first was. Condition or threshold that says you're not eligible to win. There's a game from Reiner Knizia that might have been the first game to do this. High Society might be the first. All right, I got to wrap this up in a minute, but let's see. A Pinochle. I'm sorry. What did I call it? Pinnacle? Pinochle. Thank you. Fox in the Forest win the most tricks rule. Ashy Feet says the mind. Yeah, the mind, you're right, breaks some weird rules. What is the rule that the mind breaks? Communication? Yeah, what is the rule that the mind breaks? Because it isn't the first game to have limited communication. Nicole says, where did the idea for the back of the player mats of the world continents come from? Nicole, that is a great question. I think it came from the designers, but it may have come from Anna, one of the artists, the lead artist. Not sure. One of those two. Anna executed it, though. So I generally give more credit to the execution than the idea. So thank you, Anna, for making the back of the boards in Wingspan, in Finspan. Ray has mentioned Dead of Winter has a maybe trader. Shadows over Camelot. Oh, here's one. So Aaron, yeah, I was looking for one. If there's a game that has players skip turns, but where it actually isn't a terrible thing. Actually don't know if it's a good thing in skip mode either, but it is interesting that you can skip a player's turn as long as they don't notice. Yeah. Anyway, went a little bit over today, but yeah, thank you all for hanging out. I appreciate this conversation. I appreciate your answers about biggest changes in the game industry and the community, as well as games that break the rules. If you have any other thoughts, let me know in the comments below of the YouTube version of the video. After I upload this one, it should be uploaded in a few seconds. Have a great Wednesday, a great week. I'll see you next week. Should be newsletter week next week. Even though it seems like we just did one, it wasn't actually a full newsletter. We'll do that at the beginning of February next Wednesday. Take care. I'll see you then.